The great Atlantic liners are some of history's most tragic figures. I don't simply mean those like the Titanic, which sank with a terrible loss of life, but even those with successful careers have long since left us. Each liner began her life as a supreme feat of engineering and a symbol of national pride. They carried some of the most lavish accommodations ever assembled and bridged the great oceans for civilian and immigrant alike. But one by one they were destroyed, either through incompetence, neglect, or the savagery of war. Many were scrapped during the desperate days of the Great Depression, including the Olympic, Titanic's sister ship, and the Mauretania, once the fastest ship on the waves. Germany's Bremen took the Mauretania's record in 1929, but during World War II, Hitler tried to convert her into a troop ship for a planned invasion of England. That plan only failed after the ship was set ablaze, resulting in the execution of a 15-year-old boy. Lost, too, was the Italian liner Rex, fastest in 1933 and the first to carry an outdoor pool. She was blown to bits when the Royal Air Force heard she was going to be sunk to block Trieste harbor. France took the speed record in 1935 with the Normandy, a ship so beautiful that she downright intimidated passengers from sailing on her. She, too, was set ablaze during a troopship conversion, and when a Navy official refused to listen to advice from the ship's designer, she capsized. Only a few liners survived the war, only to be rendered obsolete by air travel. In 1967, the famous Queen Mary, fastest in the world for 16 years, was converted into a hotel in Long Beach. Even while permanently moored, she was still nearly neglected to death and only recently received necessary repairs. By the skin of her teeth, the Mary avoided the fate of her sister, the Queen Elizabeth, which was destroyed by a suspected arsonist in Hong Kong in 1972. Elizabeth's gutted corpse was used as a prop in the James Bond film, which wasn't nearly as perverse as what happened to the famed Ile-de-France. In 1956, it was her crew which saved many of those stranded aboard the sinking Andrea Doria. The thanks she received 4 years later was to be destroyed as something for filmgoers to gawk at in the 1960 movie The Last Voyage. But there's one more ship that can't be overlooked, the SS United States. After all the disasters and tragedies that befell liners during the first half of the 20th century, shipbuilder William Francis Gibbs learned from those mistakes and made an all-out bid to claim the Atlantic speed record. With support from the Navy, Gibbs created a ship that on her maiden voyage in 1952 shattered the Queen Mary's eastbound record by nearly 10 full hours. She was state-of-the-art in every way, capable of moving quicker in reverse than many could go forward. But even she couldn't compete with a jet airplane. And so in 1969, after just 17 years of service, she was quietly decommissioned. In the decades since, the United States was sold from owner to owner, dragged from this port to that, until in 1996 she ended up in Philadelphia. There, her paint started to fade and crack, and rust trickled down her hull. Even in her heyday, her interiors were never as glamorous as those of her predecessors. In designing her, Gibbs was so fearful of fire that he didn't allow any more wood be used than the butcher's block. The Navy approved, knowing this meant they could easily remove these furnishings in the event she needed to be converted into a troop ship. But soon even those decorations were gone, leaving only dark, barren walls, ceilings, and floors. And under dubious circumstances, even her speed record was claimed by an ocean-going catamaran from England. And though the catamaran didn't carry a single passenger, the beautiful Hales Trophy, awarded to the nation with the fastest liner, left American soil. Yet still the United States stayed afloat. It was as though she still held out hope that her champion would come save her. Soon a conservancy was formed with that very goal. But even with support of the Gibbs family, they could do little more than pay the cost to keep her in port. Her savior never came, only more expenses, excuses, and rejections. This past weekend, after a particularly ugly argument over dock fees, the conservancy reached an agreement with Okaloosa County in Florida. Now, after a life filled with as many indignities as successes, the United States will be stripped of her funnels and sunk, her aluminum hull left to crumble beneath the waves. They say she'll be an artificial reef. In reality, it is an artificial death. And as with nearly all her predecessors, there will only stand a museum. Only this time, the entity was well within our grasp. This is not a feel-good story. There's no solace to be taken here, and frankly, we don't deserve it. The fact is, the SS United States was never valued, never treasured, not as she should have been, and never as an important historical artifact. Had she, it would have never come to this. She was an expression of the full force of private industry and the armed forces, no less deserving of preservation than a famous battlefield, nor less impressive than the most advanced spacecraft. And even while her namesake neglected her, she stood proudly as the life's work of one man, whose ambition was made real, and with it moved us all forward. Yet for 55 years, both this nation's richest businessmen and politicians of both parties failed to save her. And so our ship of state will be mutilated and destroyed, a shameful end to a beautiful dream.